that you got the handle of her weapon. Then, of course, the screams filled the assembly hall. Immediately followed by the shattering of window panes.
Unmentionables poured in, their movements clumsy, yet swift, their gorgeous clothing in a range of untidiness. Some wore gowns so tattered as to render them scandalous.
Others wore suits so filthy that one would assume they were assembled from little more than dirt and dried blood.
Their flesh was in varying degrees of putrefaction.
The freshly stricken were slightly green and pliant,
Whereas the longer dead were gray and brittle.
Their eyes and tongues, long since, turned to dust.
and their lips pulled back into everlasting skeletal smiles.
A few of the guests, who had the misfortune of being too near the windows, were seized and feasted on at once.
Not again!
When Elizabeth stood, she saw Miss Long struggle to free herself as the female dreadfuls bit into her head, cracking her skull like a walnut, and sending a shower of dark blood spouting as high as the chandelier. Darkness falls across the land. The midnight hour is close at hand. Creatures crawl in search of blood to terrorize y'all's neighborhood.
Though you fight, stay alive. To know you're mortal and resist the evil of
The Thriller!
As guests fled in every direction, Mr. Bennet's voice cut through the smoke.
Girls! Pentagram of death!
Elizabeth immediately joined her four sisters, Jane,
Mary,
Catherine, and Lydia.
in the center of the dance floor.
Each girl produced a dagger from her ankle and stood at the tip of an imaginary five-pointed star.
From the center of the room, they began stepping outward in unison, each thrusting a razor-sharp dagger with one hand, and the other hand modestly tucked into the small of their back.
From the corner of the room, Mr. Darcy watched Elizabeth and her four sisters work their way out, beheading zombie after zombie as they went, with such skill, such grace, and such deadly accuracy.
By the time the girls reached the walls of the assembly hall, the last Leah mentioned was,
apart from the attack, the evening altogether passed off pleasantly for the whole family.
Mrs. Bennet had seen her eldest daughter, much admired by the Netherfield party.
Mr. Bingley had danced with her twice, and she had been distinguished by his sisters.
Jane was as much gratified by this as her mother could be, though in a quieter way. Elizabeth felt Jane's pleasure.
Mary had heard herself mentioned to Miss Bingley as the most accomplished girl in the neighborhood.
And Catherine and Lydia had been fortunate enough never to be without partners, which was all they had yet learned to care for at all.
They returned, therefore, in good spirits to Longbourn.
Okay, so here it is. Bingley is getting together with Jane. And Darcy and Elizabeth have an attraction-revulsion thing.
Yeah, Darcy had a bad day and is afraid that Bingley is slumming beneath his class. Poor Darcy is really not such a bad guy after all.
blah, 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 blah. We all know that if they hate each other first, after 300 pages of tedious British society, they'll hook up. What about the zombies?
Okay. So at a later party, Elizabeth learns more about Darcy.
With a white face and troubled countenance, Bingley called Darcy from the guests.
Mr. Darcy, if I may have the pleasure of your company in the kitchen.
Darcy rose, taking care not to move too quickly lest the alarm need has.
Elizabeth took it upon herself to follow them.
When Darcy took notice of this, he turned to her and said, in a whisper,
Miss Bennet, I would much prefer you took your seat. I'm quite capable of attending to Mr. Bingley myself.
Of that, I have no doubt, Mr. Darcy. Just as I have no doubt in my ability to form my own opinion on the matter. Now, do you wish to cause a stir, or shall we to the kitchen?
Mr. Bingley led the two of them down a hidden staircase into the cellar, where a most unfortunate sight awaited them.
Two adult unmentionables, both of them male, busied themselves feasting upon the flesh of the household staff.
How two zombies could have killed a dozen servants, 4 maids, 2 cooks, and a steward was beyond Elizabeth's comprehension. But she knew precisely how they had gotten in. The cellar door had been opened to let in the cool night air and relieve the oppression of the wood stoves.
Well, I suppose we ought to take all of their heads, lest they be born to darkness.
Mr. Bingley observed the circumstances. I've been attending to at the time of their demise. Delightful array of tarts, exotic fruits, and pies. Satisfied like love and grains and dust. Unusable.
I don't suppose you would me wrong. I should never forgive myself if your gown was sold.
The honor of Mr. Darcy.
Elizabeth thought she detected the slightest smile on his face.
She watched as Darcy drew his blade and cut down the two zombies with savage yet dignified movements.
He then made quick work of beheading the slaughtered staff, upon which Mr. Bingley politely vomited into his hand.
There was no denying Darcy's talents as a warrior.
If only his talents as a gentleman were their equal.
When they returned to the ball, they found the spirits of the others very much disturbed.
Mary was entertaining them at the pianoforte, her shrill voice testing the patient ears of all present.
Elizabeth looked at her father to entreat his interference, lest Mary should be singing all night.
He took the hint, and when Mary had finished, her second song said aloud,
That will do extremely well, child. You have delighted us long enough. Let the other young ladies have time to exhibit.
So this bad guy Wickham was a favorite of Darcy's father.
He sponged him for money, and that ticked Darcy off.
He tries to charm Elizabeth to poison her against Darcy.
he ends up running off with Lydia in a scandalous elopement.
I can marry first.
I just love her.
However, a carriage accident leaves him bedridden and unable to move his limbs.
Or control his personal business.
I'm afraid his doctor are of the opinion that he shall remain thus for the whole course of his life. But imagine their relief to know he shall have a devoted wife to attend to his every need till death do they part.
Whoops, dear. Soiled again.
Mr. Bingley and Jane remained in Netherfield only a 12-month.
Jane could not beard, still pulled a longboard and the merry-go-round, for every emotional attack made her long for her soul.
The darling wish of Mr. Bingley's sisters was then gratified.
He bought an estate in a neighboring county to Derbyshire.
And Jane and Elizabeth, in addition to every other source of happiness, were within 30 miles of each other.
Determined that they should keep their skills sharp, though His Majesty no longer required them to do so, their husbands built them a sparring cottage precisely between the two estates, in which the sisters met joyously and often.
Kitty, to her very material advantage, spent the chief of her time with her two elder sisters.
In society so superior to what she had generally known, her improvement was great.
She was not of so ungovernable a temper as Lydia, and removed from the influence of Lydia's example, she became, by proper attention and management, less irritable, less ignorant, and less insipid.
When she announced that she should like to return to Shaolin for 2 or 3 years, hoping to become as fine a warrior as Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy was only too happy.
Mary was the only daughter who remained at home, both by necessity of being at least one word to protect Herefordshire, and Mrs. Bennet being quite unable to sit alone.
As she was no longer mortified by comparisons between her sister's beauty and her own, Mary began to mix more with the world, eventually taking up rather intimate, infrequent friendships with several soldiers of the returned militia.
The dead, however, continued to claw their way through crypt and coffin alike, feasting on